Welcome to the top global ranked and award-nominated Grad School Femtoring Podcast, the place for first-gen BIPOCs to listen in on conversations about grad school and growth. In this podcast, you'll learn about all things higher education, personal development, and sustainable productivity. This is Doctora Yvette Martinez-Vu, and I will be serving as your Femtor, providing you with tips and tricks and everything else you need to know to successfully navigate grad school and beyond. For over 14 years, I've been empowering first-gen students of color along their personal and professional journeys, and I'm really excited to support you too. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. This is your host, Doctora Yvette. Today, I have an interesting episode. It's going to be a little bit of a rant. I'm going to be telling you all the reasons why I hate the phrase work-life balance. And this is going to sound contradictory. Why I continue to opt to use that phrase in my copy on my website when I talk about my services. I know those two things don't make sense, but let me explain it further. So the first part is why I don't like it. And the second part, why I'm still using that phrase when I am trying to promote, market my services that are much needed for certain folks. So I don't like it. Why don't I like work-life balance? Why don't I like that phrase? Well, first, I tend to place more of an emphasis on the word balance versus the phrase work-life. So when someone says work-life balance, the first thing that comes to mind is what I picture when someone says balance. And I picture a balancing beam, or I picture a weight, and there's two things on that weight, and they have to weigh the equivalent in order for the weight to not topple over. That's what I picture. When I try to put everything that is not work-related and balance it with work, it feels very, very uneven because I have so many other things that I prioritize aside from work. Work is not my entire life. So to me, it feels unfair to try to balance work with all the many different other areas that are part of your life. I also think that it's impossible to ever truly find a balance. There is no single moment or day that you are tending to your work life and your family life in the exact even way. There's no day that I spend the same amount of time with my kids as I spend time doing my work. There are going to be days that I spend more time with my kids than I'm doing work. There are going to be days that I'm doing more work than I spend time with my kids. It just depends on the season. It just depends on the time of day. It just depends on how I'm feeling. It just depends on my changing circumstances. It just depends. And that word balance, to me, does not account for that, for the many different ways that things change that make it so that you can't ever truly find a balance. I have found a way to, instead of using the word balance, to try to change it up. So in the past, at one point, I used to use the phrase work-life harmony. And then I realized there was someone who told me, when you say that, I picture Beyonce and Destiny's Child and folks just, singing. And I thought to myself, I don't know if this is the best phrase. Then I started using the word or words work-life cycling. And I actually like that because when I think about the word cycle, I think about natural cycles like the cycles of the seasons. I think about the cycles of the ocean and ocean waves, and that's a really nice metaphor. I very much like that. I've also heard people who use the phrase work-life integration, and I'm a fan of that one too. That one's not bad. But at the end of the day, it doesn't get at what are we truly talking about? Are we really only trying to talk about work and then everything else is life, and trying to put those two things together, act as if they're both equivalent to each other? They're still not equivalent to each other. So then what do we do? What do we call it? How do we arrive at finding the right language for it? Language, as we know, matters, and also language, as we know, can be problematic. And so that phrase, work-life balance, can be problematic, but I have recently opted to start using it again. And I've specifically opted to start using it again on my website and when promoting my speaking services. Why am I doing this? Does it even make sense? Yes, it makes sense to me because when folks who are in desperate need of support are searching for something online, they're going to go with the most searchable terms. They're going to go with the most popular terms. They're going to search work-life balance. Yeah, they might search the other ones, but fewer people use work-life harmony. Fewer people use work-life integration. Fewer people use work-life cycling. They're going to go with what's the first thing that comes to mind, whatever the popular phrase is, and they're going to search. And I want to be able to know that if there are folks who are my target audience, who are first-gen BIPOCs, who want a speaker to talk about how to figure this whole life and work stuff out in a way that feels good for their, holistically, for their body, mind, and spirit, I want them to find me. I don't want them to find all the other speakers that show up number one on Google. I want them to find me. And they find me if I use that phrase. So yeah, I still don't like that phrase. And yet I'm still choosing to use it strategically in this case. And then, of course, if and when they do hire me as a speaker, then I'm going to go all out on telling them why I don't like that phrase and how I do it a little bit differently from everybody else. So that's my little rant about why I don't like that term work-life balance. First off, work and life to me are too broad. There's too many areas of our life that we probably prioritize that it doesn't make sense to me to put it all under the umbrella of life. And then for work to hold that much weight over our lives, for work to be the equivalent of everything else that encompasses our life, that to me also doesn't make sense. And then when we think about the majority conversations of like who is actually talking about work-life balance, it tends to be white middle-class folks. It tends to be folks who hold multiple sites of privileged identities. It tends to be folks that don't look like me and might not look like my audience members. And so I want to disrupt this space by interfering within it, by showing up on Google, by showing up on Apple Podcasts when someone searches work-life balance. Hopefully they'll find this podcast episode, they'll listen to it, they'll resonate and say, you know what, I don't like this phrase either. And I want to hear more about what Doctora Yvette has to say about it. And how does she do this thing that a lot of people call work-life balance? And hint, hint, what I call it is sustainable productivity. And even that phrase is problematic, but you know what? We got to go with what we have for now. And as I continue to grow and develop my services, who knows? I might have another way for me to articulate what I'm doing. But for now, I'm gonna keep using that phrase, work-life balance, so that folks can find me. I'm gonna continue to teach about sustainable productivity and personal development and ways to do work and live life. And when I talk about work, I'm talking about execution. I'm talking about your ability to function. I'm talking about not just the things you do to pay your bills, but the things that you do to live and to enjoy your life. That's what I mean. So still not a fan of the phrase work-life balance, but we got to use it so that the folks that need to find me can find me. And then, of course, we can always nerd out together about why we don't love this phrase, what phrase might be better, and how we can use these terms to help us ultimately take action in our lives in ways that help to improve them and feel better for us. That's it for today's episode. I will talk to you all next time. Thanks so much for joining me in the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. If you like what you heard, here are 4 ways you can support the show. The first is to make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you email me a screenshot, I'll send you a surprise freebie. The second way is to get your copy of my free Grad School Femtoring Resource Kit, which includes essential information to prepare for and navigate grad school. You can access it at the link in today's show notes. The third way to support my show is to follow me on social media. You can find me on Instagram with the handle @GradSchoolFemtoring and on LinkedIn by searching my name. The last way to show your love is to order a copy of Is Grad School for Me, my graduate school admissions book for first-gen BIPOCs. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.
Part of the Boundless Audio Podcast Network.